everybody. Hope you're all doing well. Wednesday morning, and we're going to be having our live presentation here. It's Wednesday morning, and we're going to be talking about some issues that relate to private land sales. And I'm going to be talking about the pitfalls of selling privately, direct to tenants, direct to friends, family members, whatever it might be. So for the most part, I'm going to be just talking about private sales where there's no broker, there's no auctioneer involved, and it's just a private deal. The one thing I want to make clear before we get started is that we live in America, and you're free to do with your assets what you want to do with your assets. I am only here to give advice to people that want the advice. Not looking for an argument of any sort with anybody about the issue. So I want to say, good morning, Rachel. How are you doing? I want to say that my advice in this is only for those that are really interested in it. If you have a farm and you don't want to use a broker and you don't want to use an auctioneer and you want to sell privately, go ahead. I have no problem with that at all. That is your right to do that. And I want you to do that. I want you to do what you think is right for you. I want you to do what you think is best for you. I have over 15 years of experience selling farms. I've seen about everything that you could possibly see. I've seen every trick played. I've seen every gimmick. I've seen every shakedown that you can possibly see. And I'm here to share those experiences so that people that want to avoid those pitfalls can. Now, you might want to listen to my presentation and still, at the end of the day, sell your farm, but be more educated. You'll have more power because you understand what can happen and some of the things that do happen in these types of sales. And if I can help you that way and I don't earn a lick of commission, that's okay. I like that. That's really awesome. I really like having transparency in the farmland market where we can all feel safe, where it's a good deal for everybody, the buyer and the seller. I don't have a problem with either one of them. That's what makes this farmland real estate economy turn, really, is that fairness. Sellers have a goal most of the time. I'm going to say 98% of the time, but I'm making that statistic up. Sellers have a goal of getting the most amount of money that they can possibly get. And buyers have a goal of getting the best deal they can get. So that's the world that I work in. Is you have one half of the transaction wants a great deal, as cheap a price as they can get, and the other half of the transaction wants as much money as they can possibly get, and the two are at odds. And that's where guys like me, and gals too, stand right in the middle and help negotiate those transactions. Now, we can negotiate a farmland sale lots of different ways. As a real estate brokerage, we can broker a deal where we just have a negotiated transaction between two parties. Or an auction where we negotiate a transaction between many parties. That's an auction. Now, both of those methods work differently. I don't think I have to explain that to most of you guys, but a listing is a process where we go stick a sign in the ditch and we wait for phone calls to come. And then we negotiate individually with each individual buyer one at a time. I've used that process to sell many farms, and it has its pitfalls. The number one thing to me as a real estate broker is that each new person that comes into that process, you have to start over. You're back at zero each and every time a new buyer comes. What I really love about the auction process is that you never give up progress. Lately, I've been teaching my 10-year-old how to hook up trailers to pickups. And on the coupler of the hitch, there's that little snap down part of the top of the coupler. And he'll start pushing that thing down, and when he gets so far to where he can't go any farther, he just gives up and lets it come up. And then he starts over and tries again. And then when he gets frustrated and he can't get it all the way down, he pops it back up. And I keep telling him, don't give up progress. When you've got it down so far, don't let it back up. Don't put it back up in the air because you're giving up all of your progress. Hold it down. If you get tired, your hand hurts or something, just hold it where you've made it to, and then start from there again. And that's really the same thing with auctions. You know, when you get to here with an auction, the next step is up here, not down here again. You're not going back to zero like you do with a listing, where you're constantly starting over at zero. So from a real estate broker perspective, that's what I really like about auctions in terms of selling farmland. Not every farm is perfect for an auction, and not every farm is perfect for a listing. There are differences between the two. So speaking of auctions, we do have one today coming up in Lucas County. You can find it at bid.dreamdirt.com. We had a really nice auction yesterday over in Guthrie County. We sold 301 acres of farmland over there in 2 tracts. We had 2 different buyers, and I told our team afterwards it was my job to call the buyers and congratulate them. This was an online land auction, so it was my job to call and congratulate the buyers. And the first buyer was laughing as I called him, and you know, in my position, you don't always know what to expect when you call people sometimes. And he was laughing, and that could mean a lot of different things. So I kind of went along with it, and he finally came out and he said, oh boy, that was almost too much. That was almost too much fun. A guy could get in trouble doing that sort of stuff. So he really enjoyed the process. So I went to call the buyer tract number 2, and things got a little bit crazy. You know, I could tell that, you know, immediately there was tension in the conversation, and I couldn't tell if maybe it was between me and him or between him and somebody else, but I could feel something was going on right away. I mean, it just was instant. You just really noticed it. Well, it turned out the poor fellow was bidding on a land auction. He's in Kansas, but he's bidding on a land auction in Iowa as a riot is moving down his block. And that was the tension I was feeling as he was trying to give instructions, and he finally told me, I can't talk on the phone right now. Email me the information. I've got to go. So it was kind of an interesting, few minutes after that land auction yesterday out in Guthrie County. But we did got a really good price, over $7,000 an acre on that farm. It's a 301 acre farm with, I believe, 271 tillable acres. So, you know, the price on the tillable acres is over $8,000. It had about 30 acres of timber on it because it lined a creek and had a drainage ditch running down between the 2 tracts that took up some acres as well. So let's get into the pitfalls of private sales. And I want to share some of my experiences. And I'm going to remind you guys as I go through this. I'm giving this advice for people that want it. I'm giving this advice and telling you my experiences for people that can use it. If you're not interested in it, like I said, I'm not looking for an argument. I'm just going to share what I can and hope to empower some people in this. And, you know, if you feel like this is too much, come to us and we can help you with it. We do auctions and we do listings, and that's something we're more than glad to help you guys with, selling farms. The first thing I really want to talk about is private deals oftentimes get structured in the buyer's favor because the buyer kind of gets what they want. And if we back up a little bit from that, we're going to back up to the point where why do executors or those who inherit farms want to sell directly to the tenant? Oftentimes there's some sort of pressure there. There's some sort of a relationship. There's some sort of a pressure that makes them want to do that. Oftentimes I'm told stories about how a tenant approached the family at the funeral and said, you know, I'd like to buy that farm. They wanted to get first in line. You know, that's may seem a little bit tacky, but that's their responsibility to their farm operation. I can't count that against them. They do want to be first in line, and they feel like they get a first shot at it. And that feeling's okay. I don't have a problem with any of those things, but it's going to be your reaction that really is going to matter to that. How much does it matter to you? Is that important to you? Would it have been important to your father? I know sometimes people believe that. Would have been important to mom. Some people believe that it would have been. Sometimes while somebody was alive, they left instructions. You know, I'd like him to have first shot at it. He's been a really good tenant. Okay, nothing wrong with that up to that point. That is completely okay. And if you have feelings of some sort of pressure over that, that's you know, fairly normal for you to feel that way. Here's where sort of the hitch comes in the process. Is probably nobody told you have to sell it to them at a discount. Nobody told them you have to get into a transaction that's going to get sideways. And this is where those pitfalls are going to start to come in, is tenants can sometimes start to play games. And I'll give you an example. This is a real life example of an auction that we worked where A tenant had come in immediately into the estate and visited with them at the funeral and said, hey, you know, your dad said that I'd be able to buy that farm and I'd like first shot at it, I'd like to be able to make an offer on it. First of all, let me tell you that at auction, this farm ended up selling for $7,500. Now, the auction never was the plan from the beginning. Their plan was to sell directly to the tenant. So he goes in, he talks to them during the funeral process, says, you know, Dad said that you'd buy this farm from you guys. They said, okay, you know, we believe that that's probably what he said. He never specifically told us that, but we're okay with that. We have a farm to sell. We have to sell it to somebody, so it might as well be you. You're already farming it. Made a lot of sense. So he made an offer, $6,500. They haven't had any sort of appraisal done. They don't have much background with farmland, but they thought, that sounds pretty reasonable. You know, we might be giving him a little bit of a discount, but he was a good tenant, and that's okay. They agree on $6,500. Now, bear in mind, I already told you that later on, the auction that we sell for him ends up ending at $7,500. So there was a $1,000 discount in there. That tenant likely knew that. Again, that's his obligation to his farm operation, to operate as efficiently as he possibly can. He did the right thing for himself. Doesn't mean it's the right thing for the seller, but he did the right thing for himself. That's what he has to do. That's a part of the game. And as long as you can understand that people want to buy as cheaply as they possibly can, because that's their responsibility to their family, to their legacy, to their operation, then you'll get it. You'll understand they're not doing it to be dishonest. That's their obligation to do that. So, that doesn't mean that dishonesty can't creep into it sometimes. They start into the closing process and everything's going just fine. They're moving in the closing process. Nobody's getting too excited about it. And all of a sudden, the tenant comes forward and says, you know, I may have accidentally overpaid for this farm. I think I offered you too much money. I went to my bank and my bank said, I can only give you $5,500 an acre for this farm. Now, remember, I told you the farm sold for $7,500 at auction. He was at $6,500. He's gotten them into the closing process, and all of a sudden, he's starting to back up and using the bank as an excuse, telling the banker, and I hope I'm not teaching anybody any bad habits. I don't want to do that, but these things really do happen in real life. All of a sudden, $5,500 is what he's willing to pay for the farm. So the family gets together and says, oh, geez, you know, that's a whole lot of difference on a 120-acre farm. That's a lot of money. So they try to negotiate with him, and they tell him $6,000. He says, man, I'm sorry. The bank says I can only pay $5,500. The bank did an appraisal on it, and, you know, they say it's only worth $5,500. They said, well, could we see the appraisal? And he said, well, they didn't really do like a written appraisal. They just kind of drove by and they looked at it, and because of this and because of that, they'll only loan me $5,500. Okay. This is where, as a private seller, you're going to get kind of hung up in this thing, especially if you don't deal with farmland, because knowing that the bank will loan him $5,500 is sort of, you know, a clue, I guess you would say. What you might not know about farmland transactions is that oftentimes banks are only financing 50% of the transaction, you know, 50 to 75%. So what he's essentially doing is willing to, you know, take the bank's money and use that sort of as appraisal without saying that, you know, really he has an obligation to take money out of his pocket and put it in. Remember, I told you that the farm sold for $7,500, so it was well worth it. So they end up dragging this argument out through another crop season. This argument goes on for somewhere around January to July. They've gone through another crop season without having ever closed on this thing. They're still waiting for their money and trying to close this estate. He's still dragging them down to this $5,500, and they cannot come to anything. His feet are dug in, and he says, you know, that's all the bank will give me on it, and I just can't go any higher. I have to listen to the bank. You know, he's blaming the bank, and these people don't have access to the bank to talk to them. So finally, one of them says, hey, let's call somebody that knows about this stuff. And one night, no kidding, 2 o'clock in the morning, I get a phone call, 2 a.m., not in the afternoon, at the time when we're all sleeping. I happened to be awake that night. And I sit and I visit with this guy, and he tells me the story about what's going on. I immediately recognize what's happening. You know, it's just a tenant trying to drag these guys down. He's trying to farm it for, you know, as cheap as possible, that as long as he possibly can, and drag this transaction out through another crop season and get the best deal that he possibly can. So he asked me, could you guys do an auction for something like this? I said we could. So we had that conversation. He goes back, he says, well, you know, the rest of my family's kind of on board with it, but this guy, he doesn't like the idea of an auction. And I said, which guy? They said the tenant. Well, of course the tenant's not going to like the idea of an auction. But you don't, I mean, this is your obligation to your family. This is your obligation to your own legacy and to your parents that own this farm. You don't have to listen to that person. Realize you're at odds. You're on the opposite sides here. Okay? He's the buyer and you're the seller. You don't have to go ask selling advice from your buyer, because you're going to get bad advice. You know, I've long said one of the worst things I've ever done in life was listen to somebody that didn't know what they were talking about. Even worse than that was trusting somebody that didn't have my best interest in mind. That's the worst things I've ever done in life, and that's the worst things you'll ever do in a farmland transaction, is number one, listening to somebody that doesn't know what they're talking about. Number two, trusting a person that doesn't deserve your trust. Think about that. That is really, really important when it comes to selling farms. Don't go ask your tenant for advice on selling a farm. That's like asking a barber, do I need a haircut? The barber's going to get $5 or $10 for your haircut. I don't know what they cost now. I've been cutting my own hair, as you can see, for many years. You know, that the barber was going to want to make some money selling haircuts. So of course he's going to tell you need a haircut. The same is true in a farmland transaction. Don't ever go ask the tenant what the farm is worth. Go ask somebody that can be on your side. And that's what people like me do. That's what auctioneers and land brokers do. Is we stand in the middle of that transaction and help people create a fair transaction where all of the laws are followed and there are no pitfalls to those things. So I hope that helps you guys kind of understand some of the things that can happen if you're going to go directly to somebody else. I want to talk about another one. And this one is going to revolve more around the organizational buyers that we see and have been seeing in today's market, where they're actually competing for the most part with brokers. They're searching obituaries, they're going after these things pretty hardcore, and you may end up getting contact from one of these people when you become an executor of an estate. And maybe you're at that point in your life right now. But as farmland investing has become more organized, as we see the groups and the, I guess the REIT type groups, REIT real estate investment trusts, those types of groups becoming more and more popular as an option for investing in farmland. And because farmland's an interest of mine, I start to see a lot of these types of ads on Facebook and in my social media accounts where they're willing to let you put in small amounts of money. Lots of people, sort of a crowdfunding type of investment where they're crowdfunding these farmland purchases. Now, there has to be that one front person that's going to go out and buy the farm, right? Now, these people are investors. How can you best affect the value of an investment? Think about this, okay? Let's say that you're going to go out and invest in a farm. Put yourself in the buyer's shoes right now. How can you make that investment the most valuable? Do you think that they're going to sit around and say prayers that farmland, the valuation of farmland is going to go up 40% over the next 5-10 years? No. That's something that they can't really affect. That's something where they're at the mercy of the market. Can they buy the asset really cheap and buy money? Yeah, they can. That's where the value is in farmland investing, is buying cheap. That's the key to it. Again, I'm a real estate broker. I help people buy farms, and that's where you're going to make the biggest bang in your investment, is right in the beginning, the first step. They always say buy them right, and that's where you're going to make the most money, is on that. Okay, the the most important part of investing is buying money, buying cheap. So if you're out looking at $8,000 farms, you want to buy them at $6,000 because you have $2,000 built in immediately. When you go to the end of this and you scratch out the bottom line on this thing and you start looking at it, where'd you make the most money? You made the most money on the purchase in the beginning, okay? You didn't make it on the escalation in value throughout it. You made it in the beginning, Farmland has different ways of making money for people. First of all, there's going to be some tax advantages that you might gain, but then there's going to be the annual income and the price appreciation. That's the three ways you make money on a farmland investment. Price appreciation, annual income, and any potential tax benefits. There may be some different programs that you can be involved in as well, but I'm going to add that to the annual income portion of income off of a farm. So when you realize that these investors are out there trying to buy as cheaply as possible, they're going to use phrases with you like, I think that's a really fair deal, or this is the market price, or we did an appraisal, just like we saw in the last example. We did an appraisal and this is what it came out. You can't trust that. That is the other side talking to you. I don't know how many people are listening to this that are Christians, but you know that two people talk to you, God and the devil. And the devil will try and talk you into things that you probably shouldn't be doing, but sometimes it makes sense, and you're like, yeah, I'll do that. That makes sense. And then afterwards, the reflection, you realize, oh, geez, shouldn't have done that. Well, the same thing is true with farmland transactions. You're going to have two people talking, the buyer and the seller. You may be the seller, and in your head, you're talking to yourself, but they're talking to you too. And they're trying to talk you into these things that you probably shouldn't be doing. All of a sudden, they make sense, and you do it, but it wasn't right. You have to really think about these things or go look for advice. I've written several books, ebooks that are available through our company on these types of things, and it includes a lot of this particular information in them that I think that would be really, really helpful to sellers. I know that many of them have read it and come out of it and said, wow, that was really an education on farmland selling. It doesn't exist anywhere else. So if you guys want them, they're free. We can email them to you as a PDF. All you have to do is just contact us, send a message to our page, or you can email our communications manager. Her name is Kristen Lau, and Kristen's on here watching now. Kristen @dreamdirt.com. You can always email me. My email address is pretty simple. My first name, Jason, Jason, @dreamdirt.com. And you'll also find a link to the ebooks right in the comments section. Just go to that page, fill it out, and you'll be able to download those in PDF format. Read them in the privacy of your home. Nobody's going to know that you downloaded them. And there's a ton of information. There's a lot more of these examples that I just gave on some of these things. I want to get back and sort of finish this example because I kind of keep getting off on different things. But these farmland investors now, they become more organized and they're out there looking for deals. They will call people like me and they will tell us, we're looking for something at a deep discount. Deep discount. What does that mean? Deep discount means 25 to 40%. We want to buy 25 to 40% under market value. Want to buy at a deep discount. When you're the executor or the seller of a farm, do you think those people are going to come to you and tell you, we'd like to buy your farm at a deep discount? They're probably not going to. You're going to be sitting there with that $8,000 an acre farm, and they're going to come in and they're going to say it a different way to you. They're not going to walk in and say, hey, you got an $8,000 farm, I'd like to buy it at a deep discount. I would like to give you $5,500 an acre for it. No. Instead, this is what you're going to hear as an executor of state. And again, I told you, these people have gotten more aggressive, and they're going directly to executors of estates and starting to, just get up front with us and compete with auctioneers because they know that it makes more sense to get out ahead of us rather than letting us get them and then have to buy them from us. There's a reason they want to thwart that process because they can't buy in ours. The last time I've sold a farm to any one of these large investment companies is around 2011. I'm pretty proud of that fact. 2011. Been a long time since I've sold one to a large investment company because I really believe that a lot of times when you're selling to those people, you're selling under the market value for these deep discounts. So they're not going to come to you and say, I want to buy your farm at a deep discount. Instead, they're going to come to you and tell you, we want to buy your $8,000 farm. They're going to say, hey, we'd like to buy your $5,500 an acre farm. You're going to say, well, geez, I think it's worth $8,000. And then you're going to hear a story that goes along the lines of, well, guys, it doesn't have any tile on it, or the tile is all wrong, and, this elevation isn't right, and this part is wet, and it's going to flood, and, it's next to this, and we don't like that. Nobody really likes that. Nobody's going to pay that kind of money for a farm that's like this and like that, and it's got this wrong, and it's got that wrong. Pretty soon you're going to be convinced. And you're sitting there right now and you're saying to yourself, oh, I'd never be convinced by something like that. You'd be surprised. They can be really aggressive people to where you're going to be convinced by the end of the thing. That's why it makes more sense to come out and find somebody to stand in your corner. For what little it costs for help selling a farm, it really makes sense to have somebody standing in your corner advising you and saying, no, don't listen to that. You don't even have to deal directly with those people. Now you just deal with us, and we deal directly with those people because we understand these sort of things. But I want to make the point that most times when a buyer comes directly to you as the seller, you're probably not going to find honesty. And again, in the beginning, I said a couple of things. Number one is I'm giving this advice for people that want it and can use it. And you might not agree with everything that I tell you on these things, but these are my experiences. I've experienced these things in real life. These aren't made up scenarios where it could possibly happen. It might, could sort of happen like this. No, these are real things that are happening in real life. I see these things on a daily basis. And they are as real as they get. It can be dangerous to be an executor where there's a farm involved and you don't use some sort of a intermediary like a land broker or an auctioneer. I'm not telling you to use me. I'm just giving you advice to use one. I'm more than glad to help you, but my advice is to have somebody stand in the middle and help you with it, because oftentimes most people haven't sold farms in their life, and this is going to be the real point I want to drive home. You've never sold a farm in your life, or maybe you have one or two times, but these people buy farms on a daily basis. It's their job. It means their bottom line. If they can tackle you, they can throw you in the same bucket that they've thrown many other people, and you're gone. Okay? Essentially what I'm telling you is you're an amateur and they're a professional. Do you really want to go down that route when you're selling something so important as your family farm? I don't think that most people do. I think some people are really capable of it. I get that argument sometimes. I don't need you. I negotiate in my job all the time. Yeah, that very well could be. That's fine. You might not understand the laws and everything. You may not understand real estate transaction nearly as well as we do, but you might be a heck of a negotiator. But if you don't know what to negotiate, you're in trouble. See what I'm saying? Really, really important things, especially when it comes to family legacy and something as important as your family farm. I've really enjoyed visiting with you guys about this today. If anybody ever has any questions, you can always email me, jason@dreamdirt.com, or you can give me a call, 515-537-6633 is my cell phone. I'm more than glad to visit about any of these issues. And guys, you don't have to hire me to call me. You can call me, and I answer questions for people all the time that I never ever do business with. I'm just glad to answer the questions and help people. I sort of feel an obligation to at least the fairness of farmland transactions to offer that to people. And I'm more than glad. I answer my phone all the time. So with that, guys, we're out. We'll see you next Wednesday. We'll be back here again, 10 a.m. every Wednesday morning on our Facebook page. I really appreciate for all of you guys that watched. If you have any questions, just get a hold of us. Thank you all.